What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be talking about a very important topic, and that is drugs in Magic: The Gathering. I want to do the best I can to address an issue that has bubbled up in Magic: The Gathering several times over the past couple of years, and again recently, about the use of drugs. I also want to start out by saying I seriously have no issue whatsoever with what folks do on their own time in the safety of their own homes. Those who best know me know I'm no prude when it comes to 6 grown adults cramming into a Buick Regal to smoke a joint before a draft, hypothetically. But that is not the kind of drugs I want to talk about. I want to talk about performance-enhancing drugs abused by both competitive and non-competitive level players, known best as Adderall or Vyvanse. To keep the scope of the conversation reasonable and to keep the video reasonable in length, I'm going to speak specifically about competitive play and these drugs for a few reasons. Specifically, the large cash prizes involved in competitive play, as well as the promotion these players receive by media in our space. If you're popping Adderall to help increase your chances of taking down your local draft or FNM, that's on you. Before a ton of you start screaming about how some folks have legitimate scripts for these drugs and need them to function properly, I promise I'll get to that later. First, I want to address that the overuse of drugs like Adderall and Vyvanse are not a unique Magic: The Gathering thing. We've seen bans come down as high as the NFL for players using it as a performance-enhancing drug. But let's start by first discussing what Adderall is and how it works. Basically, Adderall is a mixture of 4 different amphetamine salts. Its chemical makeup is very similar to crystal meth or MDMA, or otherwise known as ecstasy. Once Adderall gets to the brain, it mimics the actions of the neurotransmitters epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, norepinephrine, and dopamine, although in higher quantities. So as dopamine brings a rush of reward and pleasure to the nucleus of accumbens, part of your brain, an area of the forebrain just behind the eyes, epinephrine is tapping into the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for our fight or flight response, triggering alertness, clarity, and focus. Norepinephrine, meanwhile, works to control all these activities by facilitating the communication between neurons and helping them to last longer than they normally would. Thus, the chemicals are constantly being released. This is actually pretty similar to the anxiety medicine I take, which is known as a SSRI, serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which basically means neurons in your brain are you have these reuptake when you experience pleasure or happiness or whatever, dopamine is released into the brain. I'm not a doctor, but as a longtime patient for anxiety, I pick up some of these things. And so what I take to control my anxiety is called an SSRI. It actually, normally these things are released in your brain and then reuptook back. But the drug I take, Effexor, which is supposed to help control my anxiety and panic attacks, it prevents or helps block the reuptake, thus increasing the average level of these things in your brain. Whether or not it works for me is hard to say because I still have panic attacks here and there, but Adderall works in a similar way, keeping these chemicals in your brain longer than they're supposed to. It's because of these effects that Adderall is among the many that are called study drugs. For example, you hear kids in college taking Adderall, abusing Adderall so they can pull all-nighters and cram for tests. It gives students an intense focus on the work they're doing, and based on anecdotal evidence, it allows them to literally cram more information in their brains quicker. Now, I'm not sure if that's ever been scientifically proven, but this is why people take Adderall when they're in college, and why people also take Adderall when they need to focus. And people who legitimately have ADHD need it to get through daily life. Although the percentage of people taking Adderall or Vyvanse appears to be significantly higher than the actual number of people who need it. So, is Adderall a performance-enhancing drug? Since I'm not a doctor, I dug up some quotes from Dr. Gary Wadler, previous chairman of the World Anti-Doping Agency. And one of his quotes about it is, or when asked about it, he said, "It increases alertness, aggressiveness, attention, and concentration. It improves reaction time, especially when fatigued. Some think it also enhances hand-eye coordination. Some believe it increases the mental aspects of performance. It brings, not to mention, possible increases in acceleration speed, strength, and power that accrue to Adderall users." It's no wonder that he calls Adderall one of the quintessential performance-enhancing drugs, and goes on to say, there's no question it's a performance-enhancing drug. Given that we now can safely assume it is a performance-enhancing drug, when abused anyway, let me explain to you why, as a Magic player who might not be abusing this drug, should favor its outright banning at the pro level and in large cash tournaments. I submit that, of course, these type of drugs will not make you, quote, better at Magic. It won't make you a better Magic player, but it will give you an unfair advantage in large, long-running tournaments. Especially noticeable in, say, round 6 or round 8 of a Grand Prix, when mental fatigue starts to kick in for most players. Being extra mentally sharp will decrease the amount of mental missteps, see what I did there, that you're likely to make. And when you're playing for large sums of cash, it's not unreasonable to expect to be on a fair and balanced playing field. I, for one, have a legitimate prescription for this drug, and I actually rarely take it outside of pre-release or Grand Prix events. That should tell you something. Okay, that brings us to the problem of enforcement. Even with rigorous testing and rules at high levels of competition, like the NFL and Major League Baseball, they still cannot control its use. Hardly a week goes by without a player being suspended these days for its use, even if you catch everyone who uses it without a prescription, it's a script that's very easy to get in the Western world. Let me give you an example. Adderall has been banned by virtually every sports organization, the NCAA, Major League Baseball, NFL amongst, as well as other esports companies. But the NFL, like other sports, allow players who have a medical need for the drug to use it without penalty. They just have to apply for an exception. Now, the NFL doesn't disclose the number of exceptions it has, but Major League Baseball happens to, and 5 years ago, it was over 100 players in the league had these exceptions to use Adderall. And when this number was brought up to a doctor in internal medicine, they were shocked. The quote said, "I'm an internist. I see a lot of patients. I can count on one hand the number I've seen over the years who had ADHD to such a degree that they required medicine." And went further on to say, he says, ADHD has become the diagnosis du jour in today's society. Now, how the heck do you fix it? I accept that there's no real way to enforce any kind of widespread testing, and I wouldn't support that. But my proposal is twofold. Initially, my initial thought is that since these type of medications are not exactly the type of medications you will die from not taking, like a heart medicine or something like that, it seems totally reasonable to expect people, even those who have legitimate prescriptions, to abstain from using these while in competition, since it's such a short period of time. When I hear stories, and I have heard them, of seeing pros and non-pros alike exchanging these pills in the bathroom of GPs I've attended, it further proves my point. If they didn't think there was anything wrong with them taking this drug, why would they be so cloistered about it? They know they're cheating. Now, here's a more reasonable solution. I know this is very unlikely to pass in today's world, so I have to be flexible and propose a more palatable option. Drug test the top 8. You make the top 8. Part of making the top 8 is peeing in a cup. Plain and simple. You will have to allow for exceptions with a prescription. So everyone accepts this, and you will just have to make the most of catching the people abusing the drug on a non-prescription basis. Most likely, will it lead to more people who are committed to using the drug just getting legitimate prescriptions? Sure. But it will help raise awareness and will deter people from taking it and thinking they won't get caught. The first person who gets disqualified for the top 8 for performance-enhancing drugs will send a ripple through the Magic the Gathering community. Now, I think Wizards knows about this problem, and they're deathly afraid of addressing it, because once people start getting caught, they're going to see how big the problem really is. So I know my suggestions aren't the perfect suggestion, but I do think something needs to be done about Adderall and Vyvanse misuse on the tournament and pro level. So what do you think about people using Adderall for a competitive edge in events? And what do you think is a reasonable solution? Do you think maybe we shouldn't do anything at all and just accept, well, we can't really sort people out, and I don't really want to have to deal with being drug tested at a major event? Or do you think we need the nuclear option and ban it across the board? I'd love to hear from you in the comment section down below. I think something needs to be done and this topic needs to be addressed. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll talk to you again real soon.